Hi, this is Iggy with ThisBytesForYou, and in this video, we're going to be doing a video review of the XFX Radeon RX 5600 XT THICC II Pro. All right, so along the top here, you're going to see my video on the unboxing of the card, and it's pretty important because it shows you everything that comes inside of the box. And don't worry, you don't have to watch it just now. I'm gonna have all of the videos I have up above in the description down below, so you could check out after this video. So the reason I said it's pretty important, that way you know everything that comes inside of the box. When you buy it, you don't last minute have to go out buy a cable or adapter. Now, talking about what comes inside, it comes with a dual 6-pin to 8-pin, which is pretty important for those power supplies that may not have an 8-pin connection to plug into the card to power the card. Now, this card is based off of AMD's 2nd gen 7nm process, the RDNA architecture. Now, the boost clocks are 1620 megahertz with 1560 megahertz of game clock speed, and it does have 6 gigs of 192-bit GDDR5 RAM. Now, there are two versions. There are the 12 gigabit and the 14 gigabit per second card. This is the 14 gigabit per second card. Now, for being a kind of high-end budget card, it is actually a pretty big card. It measures 11.2 inches by 5.83 inches by 1.73 inches, and it does include one HDMI 2.0B port along with 3 display ports, allowing you to collect 4 monitors simultaneously. Now, it is PCIe 4.0 compliant, but it is also backward compliant. So for those of you that have PCIe 3.0, you're safe. All right, so in this review, we're going to be going over some benchmarks. We're going to be comparing this card, again, the XFX Radeon RX 5600 XT THICC II Pro, alongside the EVGA Geforce RTX 2060 KO Ultra card. Both are pretty powerful cards for their price line, but I'm gonna give you a comparison of the two so you can decide which is best for you. The games and the benchmarks that we're going to be utilizing in this review are UL's 3D Mark Firestrike, UL's Time Spy, Metro Exodus, Assassin's Creed Odyssey, Shadow of the Tomb Raider, Far Cry 5, and Tom Clancy's Ghost Recon Breakpoint. All right, so coming along to 3D Mark, we can see on the screen here, there was a pretty big advantage on the 5600 THICC II Pro. Now, in all of these benchmarks, I'm going to be showing you not only how well it performed, but I'm also going to be showing you temperatures as well as wattage consumed on average and max. So we can see here on average, the THICC II Pro did consume slightly less power than the 2060 KO Ultra Gaming. Now, on the downside, comparing the hotspot to the GPU temperature on the 2060, the 5600 THICC II Pro did come up slightly above. Now, jumping down to Time Spy, this one actually flip-flopped. The 2060 KO Ultra actually came up slightly above the 5600. Still though, the 5600 did come up quite a bit hotter than the 2060 KO Ultra, but again, consumed less power. So for the game benchmarks, while I did in the written review cover 4K, 1440p, and 1080p, I'm only going to be showing you 1440 and 1080p because, well, 4K didn't cut it out so well, but you can check it out in the written review down in the description. Now, going on to gaming to Metro Exodus, we can see on Ultra and high at 1440p, the 5600 came slightly below the 2060, but still wattage consumed was a little bit lower on the 5600. And again, the temperature was a little bit higher on the 5600. But on the 1440 medium, the 5600 did come up slightly above the 2060. Now, coming down to 1080p, we can see the 2060 did come up slightly above, anywhere between 1 and 4 frames per second. Then on the medium setting, that one did come up 12 frames per second faster on the 2060. Now here we can see, again, the 5600 did come up slightly hotter, but again, consuming less power. Now on Shadow of the Tomb Raider at 1440p, on the highest setting, we can see that we did come up 1 frame per second lower than the 2060, but then on high and medium, we came up 1 frame per second higher and actually matched that of the 2060. And then once again, and actually within the entire review, the wattage consumed on the 5600 comes in lower than on the 2060, and the 5600 does come up slightly hotter than the 2060. Now at 1080p, we can see the 5600 came between 1 and 2 frames per second lower than the 2060 KO Ultra. Then as usual, the power and the cooling. Now coming to Assassin's Creed Odyssey, at 1440, we can see on very high we came 1 frame per second lower than the 2060, and both on high and medium we actually matched the 2060 KO Ultra, which is actually pretty awesome when you're comparing cards. Now coming down to 1080p, which is one of the best resolutions for the gamers out there, we can see at very high they came in exactly the same, but then moving over to high and medium, we're seeing anywhere between 1 frame per second and 7 frames per second difference in favor of the 2060. Now, coming over to Far Cry 5, we can see at Ultra, the 5600 actually came up 4 frames per second faster than the 2060. On high, again 4 frames per second faster than the 2060. And then on normal, 5 frames per second faster than the 2060. So the 5600 is holding its own on Far Cry 5. Now, coming down to 1080p, we can see much higher differences here. On 1080p Ultra, there was a 9 frame per second difference in favor of the 5600. And then now, mind you, I've been testing all of these 3 separate times, and after the 3rd time, I do tally up the results, and I always pick between the lowest, the middle, and the high. I always pick the middle. And on 1080p high, for some reason, the frames per second were always relatively lower. Now, in the middle, we can see that it was actually 1 frame per second lower than the 2060 KO Ultra. On 1080p normal, we did come up 6 frames per second faster on the 5600 over the 2060. Now, moving over to Tom Clancy's Ghost Recon Breakpoint, we can see on 1440p very high, there was a 7 frame per second improvement on the 2060 versus the 5600 in favor of the 2060. Now on 1440p high, it was only a 1 frame per second difference in favor of the 2060. And on medium, the 2060 did come up 2 frames per second. On 1080p, we can see on very high and high, there was between 5 and 10 frames per second difference in favor of the 2060 KO. But on 1080p medium, we saw the 5600 outperform the 2060 by 15 frames per second. Now, throughout this review, we can see that on the 5600, it did get hotter than the 2060 KO Ultra, but then flipping that around, the 5600 did come in consuming less power than the 2060 KO Ultra. The other thing I noticed during this benchmark was the 2060 KO Ultra at around 71 degrees started revving up its fan to keep itself cooler. Maybe it was 70 degrees, but started revving up the fans to keep itself cooler, making itself a little bit louder. Not a ton louder, but noticeable over the 5600. During the entire time I was reviewing both the 5600 and the 2060, I tried my hardest to overclock them, but unfortunately, because the 5600 XT is based off of the same die as the 5700 XT, the Navi 10 die with reduced shaders and memory, and a few other little intricacies, I wasn't able to get any more than about 5 frames per second. Now the same goes for the 2060, which is based off of the same die as the 2080. Now that sounds exciting and everything, but unfortunately, because of the way the memory is managed and a few other things within the cards, you're not going to be able to get up to that level of performance. So in the overclocking of the 2060, it was again about 5 frames per second difference between stock and overclock. And man, I pushed these cards hard, almost, well, and a few times to the point that we got some artifacting, but of course I would always reduce it after that, and I couldn't pump out anymore. That's when I realized about the die differences. And then I thought, well, of course they want you to buy the higher end cards versus the lower end cards, so it makes a lot more sense. Now, in this video, I show you some gaming performance on Tom Clancy's Ghost Recon Breakpoint. Fortnite, Grand Theft Auto 5, which is older, but people still play it and people love it.
Man, if you need some bread, I can can hook you up with JB's tow truck. It ain't got glamour, but it's some money to be made.
So him and Tanya can smoke crack in peace?
Doom Eternal. Shadow of the Tomb Raider. And Borderlands 3.
Hunt takes all!
All at 2560 by 1440 at 60 Hertz. Now mind you, the Asus monitor I have that I'll go ahead and link up above, and I also have in the description down below, as well as all my other parts in the machine where I did all the testing, does do 120 Hertz, but in order to have OBS correctly recorded and then of course put it up on YouTube, I needed to bring it down to 60 Hertz. Now, I also show you how to change the fan curves and just how loud the 5600 can get, that way to help you guys out a little bit. Now, that is also going to combat the issue that the temperature does get a little bit higher. Now, I didn't do that in any of this review because I wanted to keep it just like if you guys were to buy it, take it out of the box and start playing so that you guys know exactly what you're going to get. Now, being that it has 4 DisplayPort and 1 is HDMI, you can use all 4 at the same time, 4K if you wanted to. It does support FreeSync and FreeSync 2, which the Asus monitor I'm using is a FreeSync 2 monitor. Supports DX12 Ultimate. Has an awesome 0 dB fan mode so that when it's not being used as much, you're just maybe, you know, writing a Word document or something or on Excel, the card isn't going to get very hot, so the fans will stop or slow down. It does have a dual BIOS mode, which I'm not so much of a fan of. One is for silent power saving and the other one is for performance. For me, I'm always going to keep it in performance. While it is a larger card for a budget card, in my opinion, it's kind of a sexy card. Then along the rear, it kind of forms a funnel to make it look like a blower style card, but it's not a blower style. And then the way that XFX put those bronze stickers right in the middle of the fans, that kind of looks kind of sexy. One of the other pros is that it is an affordable card compared to the 2060. The 2060 at the time of this review is $50 more than the 5600. Now, I'm going off of the price that EVGA has on their website, whereas on Amazon, it is probably like $80 more. Hard times right now. Now the cons are that the card does run hot. Now mind you, the thermal junction on this card is 110 degrees Celsius, which is hot. At 110 degrees, you know, things are going to happen. Your game's gonna crash or computer shut down. But being that the hottest it got was maybe around 85 or 88 degrees, and my ambient temperature in the house is 66 degrees, there was probably no chance I was going to even come close to 110. Now, that is another reason why I made that video on changing your fan curves and the noise level, in case you guys wanted to go in and change that on your own. Or of course, you could always implement some better cooling inside of your case. In the front of my case, I do have the Arctic Freezer 2 360 liquid cooling unit. So mind you, that is bringing some air. It's not bringing in as much air as 2 or 3 fans in the front of my case. Bringing in unobstructed air is going to benefit the card, but it is what it is, and it's still keeping relatively cool. So as it is, I'm actually pretty impressed with this card. Now mind you, if I was going up against maybe a 5700 or a 2080, a 2080 Ti, I'd throw this card out the window. But for a budget card, you're not expecting to spend $500, $800, $1,000, $1,200. This comes in pretty nicely at a pretty decent price and only slightly above the 5500, which impressed me. So between the 5500 and the 5600, I'd pick the 5600 all day. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. On the screen here, I do have linked up the video that shows you how to install this card. And just below that, I have that same gameplay video so you guys can check out just how well it performs in games, again, at 2560 by 1440. This is Iggy with ThisBytesForYou, and I'd love to hear back from you guys what you think about this review and overall. I am going to be getting back to some of that 2060 to also bring you a full review on that as well. Iggy out. See you guys.